And seeing the way ISIS has operated so far, do you think the Kurds are even capable of taking ISIS on at this point?
Well, you know, the Kurds have always had this reputation of being great fighters and that they're very good at it. And I would think that they're quite capable of doing this. I'm surprised that they haven't retaliated a little bit better. But one of the reasons why they haven't done very well is that ISIS ended up getting a lot of weapons from us. And they've captured weapons. They've got them out of Syria. And I'm sure there's some that came from Libya. So they're well armed. So we haven't done the Kurds any favor whatsoever.
Driving towards enemy territory, an armoured convoy of Peshmerga escort us beyond the front line. Just days ago, ISIS militants claimed these vast plains a nearby township of Makhmur as part of what it calls its new Islamic State. That was until US airstrikes suddenly stopped their advance. This was one of the targets, artillery used to attack Kurdish forces, who for the first time were inspecting the results of the power unleashed by US fighter jets and Predator drones.
Well, this is the impact of a 500-pound laser-guided bomb, and as you can see, the US airstrike has completely destroyed the ISIS mobile artillery piece. But out here in the open, the militants are easy to attack. Once they move into urban areas, they will be much harder to fight.
For the Peshmerga, US air support is critical. Before it arrived, they were outgunned by the Sunni extremists, armed with American weapons seized from the Iraqi army, and were quickly losing ground.
So it would have been much better, of course, you know, when the whole crisis started in the early part of this century, is just allow the Kurds to have their own country, and by now they would be in much better shape. But I think our policies indirected has made it very difficult for the Kurds to defend themselves because their enemies are well armed with American weapons.
And in the case of Syria, we saw the U.S. struggle quite a bit as they tried to decipher exactly who to arm within the opposition. And as a result, some of those weapons fell into the wrong hands. In the case of Iraq, the U.S. is arming a much more organized Kurdish force. Do you think there's still concern that weapons could really fall into the wrong hands here?
Absolutely. That's always the possibility. The intentions are always good, but there's always the danger of this happening. So I would stick to the basic principle that we have a strong national defense. We defend our national security. We don't get involved in fights around the world. We don't get involved with civil strife and civil wars, and especially what was going on in the Middle East. So no, I think the argument stands on its own merits that we shouldn't be involved in doing this. You might say, well, yeah, but the Kurds are a lot better people to support than, say, the unidentifiable groups of rebels that were in Syria, which is quite possibly be the case. But I think if we'd have stayed out of Iraq, the whole world would be a lot better off, and I think the Kurds would be a lot better off as well.
I think it's the U.S.
This is a U.S.
Yes, because this is the Iraqi army weapons.
But with Kurdish forces now receiving weapons directly from the US, according to local officials, they believe their soldiers can effectively fight the enemy. ISIS is bad. They're against humanity, democracy, everything that has to do with life. That's why we believe in the battle, and we were able to win. But not everyone is so confident. These families who fled during the vicious fighting have returned to pack up their belongings and leave indefinitely, fearing ISIS, just kilometres away in a nearby village, will return. We're all afraid the situation is bad. We think ISIS will come back and we don't feel safe. America has to help us, pleaded this woman. ISIS is evil. They behead children like my grandson. With virtually no one left in these vulnerable border towns, the Peshmerga are desperately hoping the US intensifies its campaign over the skies to help them in their desperate battle. Anna Corrin, CNN, Makhmur, Kurdistan, Iraq.
Well, the Obama administration says it must act in order to protect American personnel and diplomats stationed at the U.S. consulate in Erbil. If the city falls to Islamic militants, ISIS could have, of course, theoretically progress even further. Under that logic, do you agree that some kind of military action is needed?
Yeah, we should send in an airplane and bring them out, because it's a war zone, and why look for some disaster to happen like it did in Libya, sort of getting killed? So I would say yes, the military has a responsibility to retreat when they need to, and it's a fight that we have lost. I think we have spent too much, and look, I lived through the time and was in the military during the Vietnam War, and what a disaster that was, and it ended up with a retreat. And look how much better off Vietnam is today, because we just flat out left after we and the French have done such harm to the Vietnamese. So I think the sooner we get out of there, the better. We don't have a moral responsibility. We don't have a constitutional responsibility. It has nothing to do with our national security. It jeopardizes our national security, and it's bankrupting our country. And this is exactly what Osama bin Laden wanted. He wanted to engage us over there, because he says, I'll bring you down like I brought the Soviets down, because we'll take you to bankruptcy. And we're doing the same thing, because we flat out can't afford it. It's a failed policy. I think after so many years and so many decades, we ought to admit the truth.
So you believe there's no moral obligation whatsoever on the part of the U.S. to go back in there?
Not as a government. I think people who are interested and they want to donate money and send the Red Cross over there to help people, I think that's very legitimate. But no, I do not believe that we have any moral responsibility to pack up, send more troops over there. Every day you read about more military going in, and of course they said we don't want to have boots on the ground. Well, we never got rid of the boots on the ground. We had special forces and the CIA and others involved, very much involved, always prepared to go back in. So no, I think it's a bad situation, and we do not have this obligation. You
did mention boots on the ground. You know, in the past, President Obama has said that combat troops are not going to be fighting in Iraq. He's made that clear several times. Yet at the same time, we've heard the Obama administration say no option is off the table when it comes to military involvement. Do you think President Obama will stick to his word, or is this essentially mission creep as you see it?
Well, of course it is. That's the way both administrations have run things. There's always mission creep. And, of course, the Republicans, the hawkish Republicans now are hysterical that he's not bombing and killing and sending more troops in faster, even with all these failures. It's unbelievable. When are they ever going to quit and say, hey, maybe our policies are wrong? And yet we continue to do the same thing over and over again. So, yes, I think there will be mission creep. I think it's already there. I think we never really left Iraq, and now we're building up the troops again, and who knows what the unforeseen consequences will be. It may get worse before it gets better, and then we're going to have to send a lot more personnel in. And besides, using bombers and using drone missiles, it's an act of war. We're committing war. And innocent people die. Look how many innocent people have died at the hands of our drone bombs. And at the same time, this same thing will happen again, and there will be a lot of unintended consequences, and it certainly will be an expected consequence when it will drive us further into bankruptcy.
And then, of course,